Back in 2016, my friends and I for the longest time had been itching to go camping to our local camping site in the Los Padres National Park in Southern California. When we found the perfect weekend to go to that didn't interfere with any of our work schedules, we set the date. 3 days before the trip, we found out we were going to get hit by the El Niño rainstorm. Us being the type of dudes that we are, didn't care if we got hit by the storm while camping. So we packed up our cars and made the 45-minute drive to the campsite. The campsite was a family-friendly one, where there were about 100 camping lots that circled around the clearing in the forest. We found the perfect spot that was underneath huge, thick trees that would help block as much rain as possible, and it helped out that the restrooms were only 30 yards away. As soon as we got to our spot, we took advantage of the afternoon sky being cleared for the moment, and we rushed to set up our spot. The layout that we did was that we pitched our tents close by, where our tent doors were only 6 feet apart. The reason why we did this is because, in order to combat the rain, I brought a 30 by 30 foot thick blue canopy tarp that I threw over to cover us from the rain above and from the rain that would be running through the ground. It was a genius move on my part. But whenever you would walk around our tent, you would be making so much noise from crunching the plastic tarp. Hours passed and we were all around the campfire. It was late into the evening, and this was the first time that I noticed that there were barely any other campers. They were mainly camping in their RVs like the fake campers they were. In my honest opinion, they were the smart ones. Unlike my friends and I that were sleeping in 2 small tents, with our only protection being the blue tarp. At this point, I was tired from a long day of work, and I decided that I was going off to bed. My friends followed my lead as well. The way that the sleeping arrangements were was that I had my friend Ray sleeping in my tent, and AJ and Steven were sleeping in theirs. Before I called it a night, I whispered to Ray and told him, "I'm going to prank call Steven and AJ, but I'm not going to say anything." Ray smiled as I dialed my friends up. I called them on restricted, and Steven's phone started to go off. Both of them, being the way that they are, got timid very easily as they said to one another,
"Who's calling you this late in the night?
I don't know, they called me on restricted.
Are you going to answer?"
Of course not.
Ray and I were holding in our laughter as they ignored our call. I decided to do it one more time. Once their phone started to ring, they started to freak out once again, and they said,
"Who is it this time?"
Same person, I think I'm going to answer it.
As they did answer, Steven said in a very shaking tone.
Hello?
Ray and I had to hold in our laughter as we kept as quiet as possible, not wanting to make any noises that would give off that it was us. I held the phone close to my mouth as I began to breathe heavily in a murderous way. Then ended the call, and just hearing them freak out the way they did was making my night even funner. Me being the idiot that I am, called them one more time, and this time, Steven picked up the phone immediately and said in a tough voice,
"Look, whoever this is, you better stop. I'm about to call the cops if you keep on calling."
Ray and I looked at one another as we, at the same time, began to loudly fake moan into the phone and immediately started to bawl out in laughter. AJ and Steven were so mad at us for pulling this prank on them, and they were cursing us out. Me, finally calming down from laughing so loudly, told the boys, "Good night. I will have pancakes ready in the morning." Since I fell asleep relatively easily, I was out in a matter of minutes, while Ray, AJ, and Steven were up for a while longer. I was the first of my friends to wake up in the morning, and as I promised, I had the pancakes already cooking by the time that anyone else woke up. The smell of me cooking woke up my friends, and one by one, they got out of their tents. As we were eating, AJ spoke up and said,
"Hey, Jay, the prank that you pulled last night went a little too far."
Yeah, you had us ready to run to our car and take off.
Me, feeling a bit guilty, apologized and said, "Sorry guys, my bad."
Yeah, it's one thing to prank call us like that, but then to walk around our tent and then go inside it in the middle of the night is totally out of limits.
Me, not knowing what they were talking about, said, "What are you guys on about?"
"Come on, still with the jokes. You were the one that was walking around our tent and you walked in."
Ray spoke up and said,
"That wasn't Jay who was walking around. I thought that was you two getting your revenge on us for scaring you."
"That wasn't us doing that. It was you two."
So to explain, after I fell asleep, About an hour had passed where Ray, Steven, and AJ were still up, and all was quiet in the forest until the sounds of footsteps were heard stepping on our blue tarp that was on the ground. At first, my friends thought that it could have been just a forest animal wandering around, but the heavy footsteps were a dead giveaway that it was a person. As they described, the person was walking all around our tents, making constant figure eights. The person would place their fingers on the tent's fabric walls and run them up and down. The footsteps finally stopped after a couple of minutes, right in between our tent's doors. The three of them were already having their hearts pounding out of their chest. It was silent for a long minute until the sound of the tent's zipper being slid open. As AJ says, the tent's door was only opened halfway, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. But in the darkness, both Steven and AJ saw the silhouette of a man's face as he popped his head into the tent to look at both of them. AJ and Steven faked being asleep the entire time, but they kept their eyes locked onto the man. The man then opened the tent fully and walked inside the tent, just standing at the entrance. The man didn't say a word or do anything, just watched the both of them laying in their sleeping bags. After their longest minute ever, the man just turned and stepped out of the tent, and they heard his footsteps walking away, disappearing into the night. The entire time that this was happening, Steven and AJ thought that it was either me or Ray doing this, and Ray thought that it was AJ or Steven doing it. Back to us arguing back and forth at the breakfast table, we were interrupted by a man walking to our campsite, and he said,
Good morning, boys. How did the four of you sleep last night?
This man spoke in a smoker's voice, as if he has been doing that for all of his 45 years of being alive. He wore a dirty, sweat-stained white t-shirt that looked more gray at this point. He smelt like liquor, not a good sign at 8 in the morning, and his words were just mumbling around. We didn't say a word to this guy, as he then asked us if we had any cigarettes to spare him. I said that we didn't smoke, and he replied,
Oh, well, if you boys want to visit me in my RV, just stop by any time.
The man continued to walk away, towards the restrooms, and when he was done using it, he walked back to our campsite. He didn't say anything this time, but he looked at us and gave us a nearly toothless smile, and he walked back to his RV. I took note of it, as it was the only RV that stuck out as being dirty and more run down than the others. We quickly summed up the man was the person who was walking around our tents last night, and Steven and AJ now remembered that they smelt liquor from the person who was standing in their tent. We all agreed that we would keep an extra eye out on this guy, and if he did spend another night, we would most likely report him to the park rangers if he tried anything else. When it was around lunchtime, the man came back, not to use the restroom, but just to talk to us.
So, are any of you boys interested in buying an RV? You all can go check out mine right now and see if you want to buy it. I don't need it anymore since my wife left me. Just check out the inside of my RV.
No, we are good, sir, I said with a visible threatening tone. The man seemed to notice this and he walked away. The man did end up leaving a few hours before sunset, but the entire time that he was there, he kept glancing at us. The man had his RV about 50 yards away from us, and I noticed that he had a restroom right next to his RV. Why did he make an effort in walking all the way over to our campsite to use our restroom? Also, why did he even use ours if RVs come with restrooms installed in them? Whatever the man wanted, we were just glad that we were about to enjoy the rest of our weekend. Why I no longer go camping, and why I really love my dog. To understand my story, you sort of have to know a tiny bit about trespassing laws in our country, in that we don't have any so long as you're respectful and non-destructive. You can walk over any hills you like, and in my case, camp on any beach of your choosing, so long as once you leave the area, it is how you found it. I used to love camping when I was little. Our family would go multiple times a year with a large group of my parents' friends and their kids. On average, there were maybe 10 of us at a time, which was a bit of logistical challenge since we always headed out to this one really remote beach on the coast. Actually, we weren't the only ones. There are always yachts bobbing just off the shore with people in them, and other campers lining up and down the beach. Most of them also had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene. It was very much an informal family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though this was the middle of nowhere. I guess the local council must have figured it out and got sick of people peeing behind bushes. We took a trip up in spring 2011. I'm really bad with time, but I know this because I got my dog in winter 2010, after picking her out that November from the shelter as a birthday gift for myself, as I paid her adoption fee. Guys, I know you love dogs, and she will be very important to the story later on, so let me tell you a little bit about Parmesan. Parmesan came to me as a 6-month-old puppy who had been rescued from a dogfighting situation. We're not entirely sure what breed she is exactly, but my best guess is a lurcher, Staffy mix. She's a wonderfully well-tempered dog with people and most other dogs, but you absolutely do not threaten her. She'll have you. So by the time of this camping trip, I'd had Parmesan for a few months. She had never come camping with us before, but far as my family are concerned, dogs go on camping trips. So when we all piled into the car, she came too. Unusually, though, none of the family friends could make it. So it was only me, my sister, Dad, and my mum. I didn't mind. I wasn't that attached to the other kids. I'd rather play with my dog and I'd still have my sister. The drive took the best part of 6 hours. And because we'd left a bit later, although I don't remember why we'd left later than normal, we arrived at sunset. Not a good time to be building a tent, but we'd expected to arrive to other campers already set up, and the beach to be illuminated in campfires. But the beach was empty. In spite of this, my parents started taking stuff out and trying to build the tent. They asked us to fetch some of the lighter bags from the boot of the car, while they sat pointing a flashlight at the sand to see properly. I rolled down the window of the car for Parmesan before getting out. It was pretty hot for that time of year, and I wanted her to have air. Always got to be looking out for my furry little homie. As we're fumbling about in the dark, on a beach, in the middle of November, where it's pretty spooky, the one road that led to this beach was circular and had a bridge over the water, meaning you could basically circle around the beach like a big zero shape if you felt like it. I wasn't really paying any attention to the road. I was complaining I was tired, as kids do, but my mom was. After maybe 15 minutes of my dad trying to nail the tent into the sand, my mom's asking him had he seen that car drive around? It's been a few times. My dad kind of shrugged her off. He's sort of like that. I don't know if he said anything back to her, but after a few more minutes, a car pulled up next to ours on the road and someone got out. It was maybe 15 or 20 feet from the cars to where we were, and the light was pretty low, except for the torches. We weren't expecting to see anyone else out here at this point, and I think my mom said it must be the security. I don't know why a random beach would have security. I think what she meant was the Wildlife Trust or something, as they do occasionally come down to be nosy. The guy was walking pretty unevenly. He must have been drunk or high because he had that stagger to him. There was absolutely no way this guy was sober. Cool. A junkie. Not an unusual find, but it's rare to see them in the wild. As he walked into flashlight range, we realized he was carrying a large knife. Maybe 15 inches? Although I was small at the time, so maybe my sense of scale was off. I don't like my dad, but credit to him, once he saw this, he got up immediately, holding onto the camping mallet, and put us all behind him. The man began to shout wildly at us that we can't camp here, and he was just letting us know. My dad tried to be a bit low-key with the guy and told him that was fine, we'd leave, but this didn't work. He kept coming closer to us, so my dad started shouting, and the man kept shouting back. My sister and I were crying. I remember shaking. I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in that situation. It really did seem like this guy and my dad were going to fight, and I'm going to be honest. I didn't fancy my dad's chances. While it's grim to consider, I'm absolutely convinced he would have killed my dad, and possibly us as well once he was done, as I don't think my mother would have had the common sense to run with us. I love her, but she's always put Dad and her relationship with him above us. Luckily, that isn't how it went down. Suddenly, a bolt from the darkness like a wolf descending on its prey took us all by surprise, especially the man with the knife. In that moment, Parmesan was the apex predator large canines represent in nature. She got him good by the arm and clamped down hard, ripping his jacket and shredding the skin underneath. He dropped the knife as it had been in the arm she had got him by. He kicked and punched at her and eventually got her off. He grabbed the knife from the sand and ran back to his car and drove off. Parmesan didn't follow him. She stayed with us, muzzle covered in blood. Quickly as we could, we gathered our things and all got back in the car, all pretty shook up by the incident. I looked Parmy over. Luckily, she was okay. I noticed the car's window was much more open than I'd left it. We think what happened was when the shouting started, she must have put her paws through the gap I'd left for her. As it was an old car and had the rolly-down windows and not an electric button, we think she must have been able to hit it with her paws to force it down enough to squeeze out. This is not the end of my story. We were all pretty scared, and since we had the dog with us, we couldn't book into a hotel for the night. My parents decided just to drive home so we could all feel safe, but first had to drive into the nearest town for petrol as they were kind of low. I spent the time trying to clean Parmesan up a little. I'd always loved dogs, but what she'd just done for me blew my mind. As we drove into town, we came across a petrol station, but it looked closed. My dad drove up closer to get a good look and stuck his head out the window to get a better look at the sign. My mom asked him what on earth he was doing, and he told her he was trying to see when it opens. Never. Then we saw something that made my heart effing sink. Parked in the corner, behind a van so we hadn't seen him at first, was the man with the knife. He was sitting on the bonnet of his car, using some tissue paper to clean up his arm. It looked pretty bad. Without stopping to refuel or look anywhere else in town, my dad drove right out of there. He decided to go to the next town over, but the next town over was 60 miles away, and we didn't have that much petrol, we realized, as we began driving. We were going to break down. That's fine, Dad said. We had AA cover, and they'd come tow us home, or at least to somewhere acceptable for the night. Better than staying in the last town. After driving for maybe 5 minutes, lights flash us from behind. It was another car. The same car the man had been driving. It was him, following us. He must have realized we were low on petrol. The next half hour was one of the worst half hours of my life. I had a complete and utter breakdown, as did everyone, really. I could tell my parents were trying to keep it under wraps so it wouldn't upset us. But we weren't really little kids. We were both double digits. We knew how dangerous this situation was. Dad turned off the radio to conserve petrol. The man continued to follow us for 55 miles before he peeled away onto another road. Our fuel meter was on empty for the last 10 miles. We were driving on fumes. I don't really believe in God, but if he does exist, that was definitely one of his miracles. Once we got there, we drove into a petrol station and refilled to a full tank before driving the rest of the way home. My sister and I slept in the car after that. I only woke up once we made it all the way home. Just grateful nothing worse had happened than that. After getting some sleep, my mom phoned the non-emergency line for the police and reported what had happened. They never got back to her after that, but apparently the woman she spoke to said they may wish to in the future, as he matched the description given of a suspect wanted in relation to a murder charge. No idea if he actually was that guy or just a random psycho. As I said, they never got back to her. So what's the takeaway then? Other than crazy man on the beach, let's not meet ever again. Well, for me, it's that I love Parmesan. She's still with us now, old as the hills, and twice as grizzled as one of my mom's friends likes to joke. I don't know why she did what she did that day. I couldn't tell you what her thought process was. What I do know is that this poor puppy was born into an environment where they abused and neglected her, only to be rescued and taken to a shelter where her mother and siblings all found homes before her. Despite how badly people had treated her, when I took her home, she forgave but never forgot. I think the saying is, I never trust a person who doesn't like a dog, but I always trust a dog when they don't like a person. They have a very good understanding of human body language, and I think she must have understood how much danger we were in. If you're able to, please adopt. You might find yourself in a situation like mine one day. I promise you, if you're willing to save a four-legged friend's life, they will pay you back tenfold if they're able to, without a thought for their own safety. I paid £78 for Parmesan's adoption fee, which is a lot when you're a kid, but it chills me to my bones, knowing if I hadn't been so instant on a dog, I might be dead.
Don't skip this.